Good evening and welcome back. Tonight, we journey into the origins of Greek mythology. As always, let me know where in the world you are listening from. Get comfortable, settle in, and let us begin. In the beginning, there was no Olympus, no earth, no sea, no sky-only chaos. Not chaos as we imagine it today, with storms and disorder, but an ancient, wordless void, a yawning nothingness, vast and silent, without shape, direction, or intent. It was neither good nor evil. It simply was a silent canvas, pregnant with potential. From this emptiness stirred the first beings, Gaia, the steadfast earth, foundation of all things to come. Tartarus, the abyss, a deep chasm beneath her, darker than any night. And Eros, the force of desire, subtle yet irresistible, that would bind all creation to one another. They were not yet gods, but primal truths given form, the first whispers of existence. Then emerged Nyx, the night, draped in shadows, so thick even chaos recoiled at her presence. From her came Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, and together they bore ether, the pure upper air that would fill the heavens, and Hemra, the day, destined to chase her mother across the sky, marking the first eternal cycle of night and day. Gaia did not remain idle. From her own body she birthed Uranus, the sky itself, her son and, in time, her consort. When he arched over her, a dome of stars and clouds spanned above the endless plains of earth. Mountains, wild and towering, rose from her form, and Pontus, the restless sea, stirred long before ships or monsters had brushed its waves. Earth and sky became the first great pair, their union giving rise to the Titans, the ancient rulers of the cosmos, long before Zeus and the Olympians would claim their thrones. There were 12 Titans, Oceanus, the encircling river, flowing around the edge of the world, Hyperion, Lord of Light, whose gaze illuminated the heavens, Cus, the inquisitive mind, keeper of knowledge, Crius, bearer of constellations, Iapetus, progenitor of humankind, and Cronus, the youngest and most cunning, whose ambition would alter the course of history. Their sisters, each radiant and vital, were they, mother of the sun, the moon, and all shining things, Rhea, mother of gods and nurturer of life, Themis, guardian of divine law, Mnemosyne, keeper of memory, the past made immortal, Phoebe, radiant and mysterious, and Tethys, the nurturing waters that sustained the seas. Yet Gaia's womb was not done. She bore children of immense strength, awe and dread. First came the Cyclops Brontes, Sterops, and Argosiche, with a single blazing eye at the center of their brow, master smiths of lightning, fearless and unbowed, crafting the thunderbolts that would one day challenge gods themselves. Then came the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones vast, terrifying giants with 50 heads and 100 arms, each limb capable of shattering mountains, each gaze capable of shaking the foundations of the world. Uranus, lord of the sky, quivered at the sight of these monstrous children, and dread filled the heavens, for he foresaw the danger they carried not just to mortals, but to his own dominion, and to the fragile order he sought to impose upon the cosmos. Ashamed and afraid of their monstrous power, Uranus had forced them back into Gaia's depths, sealing them beneath layers of earth and sorrow. Gaia groaned beneath their weight. The nurturing earth, source of life, became burdened. Each breath heavy with pain, each heartbeat a drum of anguish echoing through the void. And in that pain, a plan began to form, subtle, patient, and terrible. But that tale belongs to another time. For now, remember this: in the first Agabophori law, before justice, before tools or weapons world, was shaped not by hands, but by force, by union, and by grief. Chaos had birthed the first forms, but Gaia, the Great Mother, gave them ground to stand upon. Her union with Uranus, first marriage of the cosmos, was not forged at altars or in solemn rites, but in the raw necessity of nature. The sky arched over the earth, pressing close, covering her night after night, a weight of stars and cold distance. From their joining came the Titans, vast and immortal, and other mighty beings, but also a deep and growing sorrow. For Uranus, proud and boundless, was a jealous father. He looked upon Gaia's monstrous children, not with awe, but with fear, and with swift, ruthless cruelty he thrust the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones back into her womb, into the darkness where no light shone and no voice could echo. Gaia groaned beneath their weight once more, not only from the burden of carrying them, but from the betrayal of the sky itself. Night after night Uranus descended, pressing the star-strewn heavens against her, blind to her suffering, deaf to her grief, and the earth beneath him shuddered in silent fury. She could endure no more. From her own flesh Gaia shaped a weaponot of bronze or iron. For such things did not yet exist, but a great sickle of unyielding flint, jagged as truth and sharp as vengeance, a shard of her pain made manifest. Then she went to her Titan sons, the firstborn and mightiest of her children, and revealed her suffering, her voice trembling like the earth itself. "Your father has wronged me," she said. "He has caged your brothers, silenced the womb that bore you, and weighs upon me with tyranny and fear. Who among you will aid me?" One by one the Titans turned away, fearful of their father's might, the shadow of his jealousy casting cold doubt in their hearts. Only Cronus youngest, the shrewdest, the patient observer stepped forward, his eyes gleaming not with fear, but with the cunning of the unseen. "I will do it," he said. "Give me the blade." Gaia set her trap, and beneath the silent gaze of chaos, the stage was set for the first rebellion, a war that would shake the heavens, split the sky from the earth, and herald a new age of gods and mortals alike. When Uranus descended, as he always did, laying his star-strewn body across the earth, Cronus leaped from the shadows. With a steady hand and no hesitation, he brought the sickle down. The sky shook with Uranus's cry as the blade struck deep, severing the source of his power. Cronus cast the bloodied flesh into the sea. From the crimson foam rising on the waves, something new emerged, a figure of impossible beauty, both terrible and irresistible. From that white froth came Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, destined to topple kings and ignite empires. She stepped ashore at Cyprus, radiant and serene, untouched by the violence of her birth. But Gaia's vengeance did not end with blood. From the droplets that fell upon the earth sprang other beings, the Furies veiled in vengeance, hunters of oathbreakers and kinslayers, the giants who would one day rise against the gods, and the Malaya Ashtri nymphs, guardians of the wild and the old ways. Uranus, wounded and dethroned, fled into the heavens. Before he vanished, he uttered a final cursey truth Gaia had already whispered. "Just as I was overthrown by my son, so shall he be overthrown by his own." Cronus heard it well. He took the sky's throne and wrapped himself in power, but from the moment he held it, fear coiled in his heart. Thus ended the reign of Uranus, first king of the cosmos, and began the age of the Titans. Yet even as the world breathed anew, no longer crushed beneath the sky another storm was already gathering. The Titans stood tall beneath the open heavens, and Cronus, youngest and most cunning among them, claimed dominion over all. He was no creature of chaos, nor needless cruelty, yet he ruled with a wary, suspicious heart haunted by the shadow of the prophecy that crowned him. The sickle Cronus used to bring down Uranus was hidden away buried in the earth, or lost to the seat's blade, remembered but unseen, like a secret sin. Cronus had freed his mother from torment and released his imprisoned brothers. Yet from the moment he claimed the throne of the cosmos, his mind echoed with his father's curse, pulsing through him like a second heartbeat. One day he too would fall to his own child. As kings must, Cronus took a wife. He chose Rhea, his sister tightness of quiet strength and deep wisdom, whose name would one day be woven with sorrow. Together they ruled over an age later poets would call the Golden Age, a time when newly made mortals lived in peace, untouched by suffering, unscarred by winter or war. Crops ripened without toil. No armies marched, no temples rose, and justice moved unseen among humankind. It was a world without locks, without hunger, without fear. But peace, as ever, is a fragile thing. In time, Rhea bore children, and with each birth, Cronus remembered Uranus's dying words. He did not waver. The moment Rhea placed each newborn in his arms, first Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, Cronus opened his jaws and swallowed them whole. No cry remained, no cradle, no Tracianly. The knowledge of life sealed within their father's belly, like seeds buried in winter earth. He told Rhea it was necessary that he would not suffer the fate of Uranus, that the throne must be protected at any cost. And Rhea, proud though she was, could not stand against him. She wept, but tears could not change fate. 5 times she bore a child, and 5 times Cronus's fear devoured them. But the 6th time, Rhea's grief hardened into resolve. When she felt the child stir within her, she did not go to Cronus. She fled to the island of Crete, where mountains touched the sky and deep caverns breathed beneath the earth. There, hidden among shepherds and nymphs, she gave birth to her youngest, Sonzius. And from the first moment, she knew he was unlike the others. His cry shook the trees. His eyes opened before his first breath. When he gripped her finger, he held it with the strength of destiny. To deceive Cronus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and placed it in his hands. He swallowed it whole, believing the threat had passed. But beneath Mount Ida, the true child was hidden. Zeus was nursed in secret, guarded by the Curetes, warriors who clashed their shields in rhythmic clamor to drown his cries. He was fed by the goat Amalthea, whose milk filled him with unearthly vigor. And as he grew, so too grew the storm, destined to tear the world apart. Yet for now, the age of Cronus endured. The sky stood high, the earth flourished green, and the Titans ruled from their ancient thrones, blind to the gathering winds. But deep within Cronus's belly, 5 imprisoned children stirred in darkness. And far to the west, a child born in secrecy watched the star sand, waited. In the hidden folds of Mount Idaware, the air thinned, and the wind whispered ancient names through stone, and Panesius grew to manhood. Raised in secrecy, far from his father's gaze, he learned the world not from scrolls, but from silence, the hush of high peaks, the rustle of leaves, and the guarded tales murmured around firelight by those sworn to protect him. He drank the milk of Amalthea, the divine goat who had nourished him since birth. From her broken hornlost by accident or omen sprang the cornucopia, symbol of unending plenty. When Amalthea died, Zeus set her hide among the stars in tribute, fixing her memory into the heavens he would one day command. But he was not born for solitude or stargazing. Prophecy pulsed in his blood, and rebellion throned in his bones. As he came of age, Gaia herself began to stir. She remembered Cronus's betrayal and the agony of her sansth Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones buried in Tartarus. Her vengeance had not ended with Uranus. It had merely slept. In Zeus' dreams she whispered truths older than stone, and in his waking steps she guided him. First she led him to Metis, Titaness of wisdom, whose mind was as sharp as flint and whose loyalty leaned toward the future. With her counsel, Zeus shaped a plan. To challenge Cronus, king of Titans and ruler of time, would require more than strength. It would require cunning. Zeus returned in disguise to his father's hall. There, with Metis's craft, he offered Cronus a potion mixed with wine, bittersweet and heavy as honey. It churned in the old Titan's gut, and at last, with a shudder that shook the halls, Cronus vomited up the children he had swallowed long ago. They emerged not as infants, but full-grown and radiant, clothed in the power of God's reward, into a world already bracing for war. Hestia, keeper of the hearth, Demeter, giver of grain, Hera, proud and sharp-eyed, Hades, lord of the dead, and Poseidon, master of the deep. For the first time, the 6 siblings stood together. They looked toward the throne that had condemned them to darkness, and they did not forget. But Cronus was not alone. The Titans rallied to him, gathering atop Mount Othrys, their ancient stronghold. Only Oceanus held back, too older, too wise for the coming bloodshed. But Cous, Crius, Hyperion, and Iapetus took up arms. Thus began the war the poets would name Titanomachith, clash of titans, and Olympienza, conflict that shook heaven and split the earth to its core. For 10 years the battle raged without end. The sky blackened with storm and smoke. Thunder and fire rolled across the mountains, and the young world below, still quiet and new, watched in dread as its masters fought for the right to rule. The Titans held Mount Othrystal, time-worn, ancient with memory, while Zeus and his kin claimed Mount Olympus, a peak still untouched by war. The battles that followed were terrible and unrelenting. Lightning split the heavens. Tidal waves swallowed islands whole. Volcanoes bled fire, and winds howled like wolves across the darkened world. At times the war seemed endless, neither side able to strike the final blow. But Gaia, ever watchful, knew the balance could not shift without what had been long buried. She counseled Zeus once more. To win the war, he must descend into Tartarus and free the monstrous uncles Cronus had chained in Firth Cyclopes and the Hecaton Shires. With his siblings beside him, Zeus shattered the gates of the underworld and released the imprisoned powers. The Cyclopes, grateful, forged gifts worthy of gods. To Zeus, the thunderbolt, symbol of sky and storm. To Poseidon, the trident, master of the seas. To Hades, the helm of darkness, granting unseen passage through any realm. The 100-handed ones rose, next vast, furious, throwing mountains as though they were stones, battering the Titans with strength long denied. With these allies unleashed, the tide turned. The Olympians surged forward with a force the Titans could not withstand. Cronus, proud and unyielding, fought to the last, but prophecy, as ever, unfolded without mercy. One by one, the Titans fell driven down from the high places of the earth. Zeus did not slay them. he cast them into Tartarus, as his father had once done, binding them in chains forged by the Hecatonchires behind bronze gates that would never rust or break. Only a few escaped that fate: Prometheus and Epimetheus, who had stood with the gods, and Themis, who foresaw the justice of their rule. Thus ended the reign of the Titans. The sky cleared, and the world scarred by fire and war began to heal. The throne passed to Zeus, not by birthright, but by might, by wisdom, and by the fulfillment of fate. Yet even as he claimed the heavens, the shadow of Cronus's curse lingered behind him like the fading echo of an old song. For power, once seized, must always be watched, and no ruler, god or mortal, sits secure forever. When the war ended and silence returned to the shattered world, the gods stood among the ruins of creation, surveying the bones of the old order. The Titans, once mighty, were cast into Tartarus, their voices swallowed by endless darkness, their fury echoing faintly only in the trembling of the earth. The age of primordial might had ended, but with victory came a new challenge, not mere conquest, but the burden of rule. Conquest could be won by strength, by sword or storm, but to govern demanded balance, wisdom, and vigilance. The world was vast, untamed, and filled with forces older than the Olympians themselves. No single god could command it alone. Zeus, strongest and most cunning, stood at the center of this emerging age. Yet beside him had fought Poseidon, lord of the seas, and Hades, silent and inexorable, each staking claims through courage and sacrifice. To deny them their due would risk another war that might rend heaven, earth, and underworld alike. So the three brothers cast lots, leaving the division to fate and chance. When the bones fell, the realms were apportioned, and the world gained its first structured order. To Zeus fell the sky, boundless and luminous, where lightning danced and storms rumbled. Olympus rose above the clouds, a palace of gold and marble, and there he ruled with the weight of kingship and the cunning of the wise. Beneath his gaze the winds whispered and the seasons turned, the heavens themselves bending to his will. Poseidon received the sea, infinite and mercurial, master of oceans, rivers, and hidden depths. Beneath the waves he raised palaces of coral and pearl, halls where currents flowed like living veins, where sea beasts older than mortals, proud serpents, leviathans, and creatures whose names had been forgotten by all but the deep. Fishermen prayed to him, sailors feared him, and every storm that broke upon the shore carried his wrath or his blessing. To Hades fell the underworld, a kingdom few mortals would covet, yet he accepted it with quiet dignity. In shadowed halls beneath the earth, he ruled as keeper of shades, judge of the dead, and guardian of treasures hidden since the first age gems, metals, and the secrets buried by time. Mortals trembled at his name, yet he alone maintained the fragile balance between life and death, enforcing laws older than Olympus itself, impartial, austere, and eternal. The earth itself, Gaia's living body, remained a common realm. Mountains and forests, rivers and plains belonged to none alone. Here mortals wandered and spirits lingered. Here ambition stirred and fate whispered through rustling leaves and shifting stones. It was a middle land, a place of encounters between gods and men, where Olympus might gaze upon the world without claiming it entirely. Thus the cosmos was ordered: sky, sea, and underworld. The three brothers, kings of their respective realms, swore a sacred oath never to wage war against one another, lest the world be torn asunder again. Thrones were set, domains marked, and followers gathered in loyalty and awe. On Mount Olympus, high above mortal sight, Zeus called the first council of the gods. Beside him stood Hera, queenly and cold as winter frost, Demeter, whose footsteps coaxed grain from the soil, and Hestia, the steady flame of hearth and home. Soon others arrived. Athena, born fully armed from Zeus' mind, wise and unyielding. Apollo, radiant and far-seeing, lord of prophecy and song. Artemis, swift and silent, the huntress of wild places. Ares, blood-handed and relentless. Hermes, fleet of foot and clever of tongue. Hephaestus, limping but brilliant, shaping fire and metal. And Aphrodite, whose smile could unmake kings and inflame hearts. So began the age of Olympus, a time of splendor, cunning, and fierce beauty. But though thrones were set and realms divided, the world would not remain still. Even gods, for all their power, were not free from pride, nor from love, nor from wrath. Their passions would ripple across the earth, stirring storms in the seas, fire in the skies, and desire and fear in the hearts of mortals. The age of Olympus had dawned, but the stories of gods and men were far from over. Cadmus wandered through foreign lands, guided by a mysterious beast whose strength carried him across plains and rivers, until at last it collapsed upon a lonely hill, spent and silent. Seeking water, he sent his companions to a nearby spring, only for them to meet a violent enslain by a serpent sacred to Ares, guardian of the sacred waters. The air trembled with the hiss of the beast, scales glinting like dark bronze in the sun, a living embodiment of divine wrath. Cadmus, brave and resolute, confronted the serpent. Steel met scale in a deadly struggle, and he struck it down. Yet victory brought counsel as well as consequence. Athena, goddess of wisdom and cunning, commanded him to sow the serpent's teeth into the fertile soil. From that earth, twisted and nourished by violence, arose the Spartan warriors fully armed, springing from the ground as if the soil itself were bloodied armor. They turned upon one another with blind ferocity, swords clashing, shields splintering, until only 5 remained. These 5 would become the founders of Thebes and Cadmus, their king, ruler of a city born of blood and courage. But killing a creature sacred to Ares carried a heavy price. The war god's wrath shadowed Cadmus for 8 years, during which he served in penance, each day a reminder that mortal courage could never escape the eyes of the divine. Finally, his atonement ended, and he married Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. The wedding was a spectacle that drew every god in Olympus, Zeus and Hera, Apollo and Artemis, and among them Hephaestus, who gifted a necklace of unparalleled beauty, a glittering treasure that would carry a curse as enduring as it was elegant, destined to ensnare every wearer in sorrow. Thus, the tale of Thebes began not with hatred or bloodshed, but in celebration, in laughter and divine pomp, unaware of the shadow that would follow. Generations passed, yet sorrow clung to the house of Cadmus. His daughters could not escape the curse of their blood. Ino, driven mad by divine torment, leaped into the sea with her child, their cries swallowed by the waves. Autono's son Actaeon gazed upon Artemis as she bathed and was torn apart by his own hounds, nature itself enacting divine retribution. Semele, beloved of Zeus, was tricked by Hera and consumed by the fire of the god's true form. Agave, seized by Dionysian frenzy, tore her son Pentheus limb from limb, the city of Thebes shaking with the echoes of maternal horror. Yet the most devastating tragedy would arise through Cadmus's great-great-grandson, Laius, He became king of Thebes and took Jocasta as his queen, yet the god's wrath had not abated. An oracle whispered a prophecy as cruel as the sea is deep. If Laius ever fathered a son, that child would kill him and marry his mother. As in all Greek tales, prophecy is a sword that cuts both ways, inviting the very fate it warns against. When Laius lay with Jocasta and a son was born, terror overtook him. He pierced the child's ankles and abandoned him on the wind-swept slopes of Mount Cithaeron, leaving the infant to die alone. But mercy, subtle and quiet, intervened. A servant could not watch innocents perish, and entrusted the child to a shepherd, who in turn brought him to the childless king and queen of Corinth. They named him Oedipus, swollen-foot, and hid the truth of his birth, raising him as their own, unaware that the threads of fate had already begun to weave a tapestry of ruin. Oedipus grew clever, proud, and strong, yet he could not escape rumor and shadow. Hearing whispers of his origins, he journeyed to Delphi, seeking answers from the Pythia. There, the oracle spoke the same terrible prophecy given to Laius. Believing King Polybus and Queen Merope to be his true parents, Oedipus fled Corinth, seeking to outrun fate itself. But fate has no mercy. At a crossroads, he encountered an imperious old man. A quarrel escalated, and swords were drawn. In a moment of blind fury, he struck him down, and only later would he learn that the man he had killed was Laius, his true father. The threads of destiny tightened. A city, a family, and a life had already been bound by the inexorable design of the gods, and nothing mortal cunning could unravel what the divine had decreed. He continued to Thebes, besieged not by armies, but by the Sphinx, who devoured all who failed her riddle. Oedipus answered Redmond. The Sphinx cast herself from a cliff. Thebes hailed him as savior and made him king. In reward, he married the widowed queen, Jocasta his mother. Years passed, and they had 4 children, Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, and Ismene. But a plague fell upon Thebes, and the oracle declared the land defiled by unpunished blood. Slowly the truth surfaced the old man on the road, the scarred feet, the surviving servant, the blind prophet Tiresias, who named Oedipus both father and brother, son and husband. Jocasta hanged herself. Oedipus blinded himself with her brooches and begged for exile. Guided by Antigone, he wandered until he reached Colonus, where he died in secret, taken gently by the earth. But his children did not escape the curse. Eteocles and Polynices turned against each other for the throne, and so the doom of Thebes continued. Polynices fled and raised an army in Argos, leading the 7 against Thebes, a war that drenched the city in blood. At the gates, the 2 brothers met in single combat and slew one another, and though Thebes endured, its spirit was shattered. Antigone, last heir of the old honor, buried her brother despite Creon's decree. For this she was entombed, alive, and the gods answered with ruin, driving Creon's house into madness and grief. Thebes survived, but its throne turned ceaselessly, each reign marked by tragedy. The tale of Oedipus is no story of monsters slain or cities razed. It is a tale of Phaetoph, a man who fled prophecy only to run directly into its grasp. A tragedy born not of malice, but of ignorance. A man destroyed by the truth he sought. Thebes, for all its splendor, was built on serpents and riddles, and no answer, however clever, could outwit the gods. Of all the wars mortal soil would know, none would echo louder than the one fought for a woman's Phaeacia war of pride, broken oaths, divine meddling, and the fall of kings. And it began not with spears, but with a wedding. All the gods were invited to the marriage of Peleus, and Thetis of Eris, goddess of discord. In her spite she cast a golden apple among them, inscribed to the fairest. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed it. To settle the dispute, they sought the judgment of Paris, a shepherd prince of Troy, exiled since prophecy warned he would one day burn his home. On Mount Ida, the goddesses offered him gifts: Hera, dominion over all men; Athena, wisdom and victory; Aphrodite, the love of the most beautiful woman alive; Paris chose love. Thus Helen of Sparta, daughter of Zeus, wife of Menelaus, marked in her youth she had suitors from every land, and her father Tyndareus, fearing strife, bound them by Odysseus's counsel to a sacred oath: whoever won her hand, all others must defend the marriage and punish any who broke it. Menelaus won Helen, and for a time Sparta flourished. But when Paris came as a guest, he saw in her Aphrodite's promise. Whether she left willingly or was taken is a matter of song, but she sailed with him across the Aegean, and with that crossing the war began. Menelaus raged, invoking the oath, and all who had sworn it answered: Odysseus of Ithaca, clever and reluctant; Nestor, the sage of Pylos; Ajax the greater, towering and grim; Ajax the lesser, swift and fierce; Diomedes of Argos, brave and battle-hungry; Idomeneus of Crete, stalwart and steady. From every corner of Hellas they came kings, princes, and warlords. Only two held back: Odysseus, who feigned madness, sowing salt into his fields, until a clever envoy placed his infant son before the plow; and Achilles, son of Thetis, hidden by his mother among the daughters of Lycomedes, dressed in silk to escape a fate she foresaw. Yet the Greeks found him, and Odysseus, ever cunning, tricked Achilles with a spear and shield amid gifts of jewelry. The boy chose war. They gathered at Aulis, a fleet of 1,000 ships, bronze gleaming, sails like thunderclouds. Yet the winds refused to rise. The ships sat idle, and the men grew restless. The seer Calchas revealed that Artemis had been often dead, perhaps by a boast, perhaps by a slain Stagand. Only a great sacrifice would appease her. The name he spoke was Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon. There are many versions of lies told to bring her to Aulis under the guise of marriage to Achilles, of her weeping mother, Clytemnestra, of a final moment of rescue, with Artemis spiriting the girl away and leaving a deer in her place. Yet in most tellings the blood was real, and the gods watched as the king killed his own child for the sake of war. Then the winds came, the fleet sailed east, and the world changed. The Greeks set foot on Trojan shores, not as raiders, but as judgment itself. For 10 years they camped beneath the walls of Ilium, the great city ruled by Priam, defended by his sons: Hector, noble and doomed; Paris, beautiful and weak; and the others, Deiphobus, Helenus, and more. The gods chose sides: Hera, Athena, and Poseidon for the Greeks. Only Zeus tried to remain above it, yet even he bent, pulled by fate and family. This was not yet Homer's Iliad, which would begin in the 10th year. The war itself had already begun it, merely with spears and walls, but in the burning of oaths, the breaking of trust, the sacrifice of daughters, and the judgment of gods. It was a war born of love, of pride, of divine rivalry and mortal vanity, of old curses and deeper fears, and it would end not with victory, but with fire. By the time the Iliad begins, the war had endured 9 long years. The Greeks, once roaring across the Aegean, had settled into a grim rhythm of siege and survival. What began in fury had become something colder, slower, more desperate. They built black-walled camps along the shore, hauled ships high upon the sand, and sent raiding parties day after day net, merely to battle, but to feed their armies. The war dragged on like a wound that would not heal, and both sides felt the infection deepening. The Trojans, safe behind their mighty walls, raised, it was said, by Poseidon himself, with Apollo once serving as mortal builders, suffered but endured. Their allies came from east and north, Sarpedon of Lycia, Memnon of Ethiopia, and others, bringing new life to an old cause. Yet the Greeks would not leave, not without Helen. Pride held them there as much as oaths. War does not live in walls, and Shipsit lives in the hearts of men. And in this war, two hearts burned hotter than the rest: Agamemnon, king of kings, stern and imperial, and Achilles, son of Thetis and Peleus, unmatched in battle, fated to die young, determined to make that death matter. Their quarrel would shatter the fragile Greek alliance. It began, as so many quarrels do, over a woman. In one raid, the Greeks had taken captives Chrysa's daughter of a priest of Apollo, and Briseis, a princess of Lyrnessus. Chrysa's was awarded to Agamemnon, Briseis to Achilles. When Chrysa's father came bearing gold and pleas, Agamemnon scorned him. The priest prayed to Apollo, and the god answered not with fire, but with plaguea, silent killer that passed from beast to man, filling the air with death. The prophet Calchas revealed the truth. Agamemnon, forced to surrender Chrysa's to save his army, did Sabet demanded Briseis from Achilles in compensation. It was a slight Achilles could not endure. He rose in fury, called Agamemnon a greedy coward, and swore an oath before the gods. He would no longer fight for the Greeks. Let them bleed without him. With him withdrew the Myrmidons, his elite warriors, silent and dangerous, forged for war. From that moment, the tide turned. Without Achilles, the Greeks began to suffer. Hector, son of Priam and champion of Troy, led the Trojan charge with quiet, noble fury. He was not Paris, who had brought the war, nor Deiphobus, who sought glory. Hector was the heart of the Scythia husband, a father, a prince, who carried the burden of his people with duty, not pride. Day by day, the Trojans pushed the Greeks back to the sea. Ships were set ablaze, heroes fell, and the first wave of doom crashed over the camp. Patroclus, friend perhaps, lover of Achilles, watched the losses mount with despair. He was the only one who could reach Achilles in grief and fury. When the Trojans breached the Greek defenses and threatened to burn the ships, Patroclus begged Achilles to let him fight in his stead. Wearing the hero's armor, he rode his chariot, leading the Myrmidons into battle. For a time, the Greeks rallied, but Patroclus, flushed with borrowed glory, pressed too far. At the gates of Troy, he met Hector. Their duel was brutal and ended with Patroclus falling beneath Hector's spear. With him fell whatever peace remained in Achilles' heart. When Achilles learned of Patroclus' death, his grief shook the camp. He howled like a storm god and returned to battle, not for glory, but for vengeance. Thetis brought him new armor, forged by Hephaestus' shield, etched with the world itself. Achilles became unstoppable. He slaughtered dozens, scattered chariots, and chased Hector 3 times around Troy before killing him. In fury, he dragged Hector's body around the walls until Priam, guided by Hermes, knelt before him and begged for his son's return. Achilles wept, softened, and restored the prince's body. But peace was brief. A poisoned arrow-perish shot, Apollo's aim struck Achilles' heel. He died young, unmatched, and the war staggered on. As Troy weakened, the Greeks vanished from the plain. At dawn, the Trojans saw empty shores, and, in their place, a colossal wooden horse. Sinon's lies convinced them it was an offering to Athena. Only Laocoon warned them before sea serpents dragged him and his sons to their deaths. Taking it as a sign, the Trojans brought the horse inside. That night, Odysseus, Menelaus, Neoptolemus, Diomedes, and others emerged from its belly as the Greek fleet returned from hiding. What followed was slaughter, not war. Neoptolemus killed Priam at Zeus' altar. Cassandra was dragged from Athena's temple. Hector's infant son was thrown from the walls. Troy burned. Helen was found in the palace. Whether weeping or serene, she lived. Menelaus raised his blade, then dropped it. He took her home. At dawn, nothing remained of Troy but ash the victors paid dearly. Ajax the Lesser drowned after defiling Athena's temple. Agamemnon returned with Cassandra only to be murdered by Clytemnestra. Diomedes and others wandered into exile. Odysseus, cursed by Poseidon, faced a decade of storms and monsters. Aeneas alone escaped Troy, carrying his father and leading his children, would later claim him as its ancestor. The fall of Troy ended not just a city, but an age. The walls that defied 10 years fell in one night, and the ashes drifted out to sea. Yet the war's survivors found their true trials not on the battlefield, but on the long, cursed road home. Menelaus and Helen wandered long across the seas. Some say the Helen who went to Troy was only a phantom, while the real Helen waited in Egypt. Others say she went willingly. In the end, they returned to Sparta, ruling in uneasy silence. Helen's name, once a poem, had become a curse. Odysseus' journey was longer and darker. Cursed by Poseidon for his role in the Trojan horse, he wandered for 10 years, blinding Polyphemus, escaping Circe and Calypso, navigating Scylla and Charybdis, and reaching the underworld. At last, the Phaeacians gave him a ship to return to Ithaca. There, with Telemachus and loyal servants, he slew the suitors and restored order thou vengeance, and war shadowed all. Others fared worse. Ajax the Lesser drowned. Diomedes found betrayal at home. Philoctetes wandered, and Neoptolemus died at Delphi. The Trojan War promised glory, but delivered only ruin, leaving survivors to bear curses, grief, and hollow songs. Before Troy stood, before heroes clashed, a deeper current of power flowed, the Olympians. From chaos came Gaia, Uranus, and Cronus. The Titans rose and fell. Zeus, youngest of Cronus' children, freed his siblings, defeated the Titans, and established the Olympian order on Mount Olympus. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon. Zeus ruled the sky with thunderbolts and law, dividing the world with Poseidon and Hades. Hera, ever watchful, punished his lovers and offspring. Athena, born from Zeus' skull, guided mortals with wisdom and strategy. Apollo and Artemis brought light and shadow. Demeter shaped the seasons through grief. Aphrodite stirred love and desire. Hermes moved between worlds, guiding souls and travelers. The Olympians ruled not from distance, but through mortal lives, meddling, favoring, punishing. Unlike Titans, they embodied human nature, magnified pride, passion, cleverness, vengeance, and shaped the fate of men as much as the fate of the world. The Olympians helped and hindered as whim dictated. Cities rose in their honor, sacrifices burned for favor, oracles spoke their will, and every home kept a flame for Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Yet beneath their grandeur lay a truth. Their power, though vast, was not absolute. Even Zeus feared loss, haunted by prophecies of children who might overthrow him. He abandoned Thetis to marry Peleus, so their son Achilles would die young. For a time they ruled. Their names adorned temples, their deeds were sung, their symbols carved into shields and coins. The age of heroes passed, but gods still shaped the mortal world. Yet whispers of change came from distant lands new gods stirred beyond the horizon. Olympus stood, but not unchallenged. Darker gods walked the earth. Chief among them was Dionysus, twice-born son of Zeus and Semele. Hera's trick killed Semele, but Zeus saved the unborn child in his thigh. Raised among nymphs, satyrs, and maenads, Dionysus wandered, bringing wine, revelry, and chaos wherever he went. He blurred the line between civilization and frenzy, joy and madness. In Thebes, he returned to his mother's land. Pentheus, rigid king, scorned him and tried to spy on the women's rights. Dionysus lured him into the woods, and in divine madness, Pentheus was torn apart by his own mother, Agave. Dionysus embodied theater as well as intoxication, masks, performance, and hidden truths. With him came the mystery cult-secretive rites of initiation, death, and rebirth. The Eleusinian mysteries reenacted Persephone's descent and return. The Orphics celebrated Dionysus' suffering and resurrection, promising wisdom and liberation. These cults did not oppose Olympus, but moved quietly beneath it, shaping the world in subtler, deeper ways. The mystery cults offered hope where the Olympians gave only law, whispering of a soul that could endure and transcend the mortal body. Even on Olympus cracks showed. Ares and Athena vied for warriors' hearts. Apollo's loves brought death and transformation. Aphrodite punished mortals for desire she stirred. The gods grew like men proud, fickle, wounded. Dionysus mirrored and appended Olympus, divine yet wandering, bringing joy and madness, tearing down kings and raising peasants. Through him, divinity was no longer distant mortals, could feel it within themselves through ritual, wine, and song. Beyond Olympus, new powers stirred as Rome rose and the world shifted. The gods mingled with mortals, leaving demigod children, some kings, some monsters, some legends, whose stories outlasted Troy and temples. Foremost was Heracles, son of Zeus and Alcmene, conceived through Zeus' trickery, shadowed by Hera's wrath. From infancy, he survived divine attacks, and as a man endured penance and 12 labors, Nemean, lion, Lernaean, Hydra, Cretan, bull, golden apples, and even Cerberus from Hades. Through suffering, he became a symbol of mortal endurance. Poisoned in the end, he built his own pyre. The gods raised him to Olympus, the only mortal to join the pantheon. Before him came Perseus, son of Zeus and Dana, locked in a tower by prophecy that he would kill her father. Zeus came as a shower of gold. Perseus was born, abandoned at sea, saved by a fisherman, and destined for deeds that would shape the fate of mortals once more. Polydex, desiring Dana, sent Perseus to fetch Medusa's head. Armed by the god Sherm's sword, Athena's shield used a mirrored shield to slay her without looking. From her neck sprang Pegasus and Crassor. On his return, Perseus rescued Andromeda, married her, and founded dynasties linking to Heracles. Other heroes followed. Theseus slew the Minotaur. Bellerophon tamed Pegasus and defeated the Chimera. Atalanta raced suitors and hunted beasts. Demigods never knew Peastheer blood was too divine for comfort, too mortal for eternity. Yet through struggle and triumph, they became immortal in story. As Troy faded and cities rose, these tales endured in poems, plays, and temple art. Mortals saw themselves in their demigod children, flawed, courageous, doomed, and glorious. Power in Greek myth belonged not only to gods or heroes, but to something older, fate, the Moirai, or Fatus Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropospon, measured and cut life's thread. Even Zeus bowed to them. Mortals could not escape fate, but could seek to understand it through omens and oracles. Delphi, the most famous oracle, spoke in riddles through the Pythia. Kings, generals, and commoners came for guidance. Misinterpreted, prophecies could doom even the wise, as with Croesus or Oedipus. Other Shrinistodona, Delos, Ammon, and countless smaller sights revealed divine will through oak rustling, bird flight, dreams, or entrails. Omens guided war, voyages, and rituals. Seers like Calchas at Troy or Tiresias of Thebes wielded influence equal to kings, bridging mortals and gods, interpreting the hidden currents of fate. Tiresias, touched by both male and female life, lived 7 generations, his wisdom unmatched. Oracles and omens were not superstition, but a recognition that mortalsheroes, kings, or loyal hearts were never in control. Fate, Moira, spun inexorably. Prophecy offered awareness, often too late. Men climbed to Delphi, brought gold and blood, seeking knowledge to face the inevitable. Hector knew he would die. Achilles knew he would not return. Oedipus tried to flee. His doomed all met what was foretold. Death was not the end, but a passage. The Greeks imagined the underworld, Hades, ruled by the stern, indifferent god. Souls arrived as shadows, ferried by Charon across Acheron, greeted by Cerberus, and divided by judges. Minos, Rhadamanthus, Aeacus, wicked, were cast into Tartarus. Heroes lingered in Elysium. A few passed through Lethe to be reborn. Hades was immovable. Persephone, his queen, her story a mirror of life and death, taken by Hades. Her seasonal return explained the cycles of nature and promised renewal for the soul. Some mortals entered the underworld and returned. Orpheus charmed Hades, but lost Eurydice. Heracles brought Cerberus to the surface. Odysseus consulted shades for guidance. Death was final, not glorious. Life demanded care in burial, offerings, and remembrance. The underworld mirrored life itself, memory, justice, and passage. It offered neither heaven nor hell, only silence and order, a realm where every soul took its place and every thread of life reached its end. Through Hades and Persephone, the Greeks wove death into the fabric of the cosmosnet as punishment, but as inevitability, a truth beyond grief or anger, where the living and the dead were bound in the same great pattern. Even the gods, mighty and immortal in appearance, were not eternal in influence. Once vivid figures, they slowly faded as Rome rose, as the world grew restless beneath the weight of old stories. The age of Olympus was ending. Their dominion, like the memory of a great song, would wane in silence. The Romans did not destroy the Greek gods, they adopted them, gave them new names, and folded their myths into Roman values and Roman conquest. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera, Juno, Poseidon, Neptune, Dionysus transformed into Bacchus, Athena softened into Minerva. Olympus itself was reshaped to reflect order, hierarchy, and empire. Thunder now struck from the Capitoline Hill. Wisdom guided the city, and the wildness of the old gods was tamed. In literature, Ovid retold the myths with wit, grace, and irony. while Virgil wove them into the instruments of fate behind the founding of Rome, shaping divine hands to the logic of empire. The gods became symbolic, distant, politicized. Their passions, once untamed and blazing, were tempered into allegory. Meanwhile, foreign deities arrived from distant lands. Mithras, born of stone and slayer of cosmic bulls. Isis, mother of magic and life. And the singular, invisible god of Judea, offering moral clarity, unity, and salvation. Philosophy further eroded belief from within. Xenophanes mocked the anthropomorphic gods. Plato sought perfection beyond jealousy and lust. Epicurus dismissed divine interference, and Stoics located divinity in reason itself. The imperial cult blurred the line between myth and politics, elevating emperors as gods. Temples and rituals endured, yet true belief waned. Then Christianity rose not with armies alone, but with words, visions, and faiths, God unseen, singular, and promising salvation. By the reign of Theodosius, pagan temples closed, sacrifices were forbidden, and the Olympians faded. There was no war between Zeus and Christ. No thunder clashed with cross. The gods simply lost presence. Their statues weathered, altars cold, the marble cracked, and ivy creeping where priests once stood. Yet myths endured. Children still learned of Heracles' labors. Artists painted Athena's wisdom. Poets invoked the muses, and stories survived in every form of art. During the Renaissance, the gods returned as symbols of human nature, draped in marble and light, in brushstroke and verse. Enlightenment thinkers examined them as allegories. Romantic writers reveled in their passion and tragedy. And in modern times, they appear in literature, cinema, psychology, and even Comixodesius still sails. Heracles still labors, still labors, still labels, still lacity, still stellas, stays, spernilu b spernas, spernis stillux, sprel and peel, and spurl, de spell and of penia, to have god po, you well look up at it, tad, do you stay up at the pure edua to be I dime at the pile of silent you are what who am and my one pen my is it waits if Jim but he's but will it be beautiful the gods were no longer worshipped, yet they were never forgotten. Myth became living memory, passed from one generation to the next, reshaped yet eternal. The Greeks gave more than a pantheon. They gave a framework to understand the world, wrestle with death, honor beauty, and explore the self. Their gods were flawed, yes, but gloriously so. In them we saw not perfection, but potential agony of choice, the thrill of risk, the pain of hubris, the solace of ritual. They revealed what we might become and what we must fear. Even now, in a world of science and silence, the myths still murmur. You hear them in tales of chosen heroes, in fallen stars, in the slow turn of the Sessonza girl, descends and spring waits. A king defies prophecy and loses all. A mother grieves her son. Faces change, but the truths endure. Gods may have left Olympus, but they never truly left us. They walk quietly in books, songs, dreams, and memorison, every tale that dares to pierce the mortal veil. They are not dead. They have simply moved. Now the story ends. The winds on Mount Olympus are cold, the torches of Delphi reduced to ash, but the myths remain, eternal in the imagination, whispering across time. Good night.